Suzy, thank you so much for coming and doing this with me.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
This is this is great. This is 3 years great for me. I've been I've been trying to get a hold of Suzy for 3 years, not for any reason other than technology would love to absorb my messages, but I kept at it.
Thank you for your persistence. I'm really glad you did. So,
And
feels like a really good fit. Yeah,
yeah, and thanks to Denise Dryden for handing the
exactly.
torch. She literally held our hands. It was like, you too.
Yes, make the connection. That's awesome.
All right. Well, I want to start at the very beginning of your story and how you came into this world of highly intuitive children, or however you like to call, address or call things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my background was as a pediatric speech language pathologist, and I had a pretty lovely, lucrative practice in the state of Maine back in 1999. And I met a little kid that was diagnosed with autism, and I'd not really worked with many kids, on the spectrum because I got a graduate degree in 1986, and there just weren't that many kids on the spectrum. I think it was like 1 in 10,000 or something like that at the time. But I met this kid at his daycare center, and that one day really just blew me wide open. I mean, it took me from a very kind of linear, you know, uh, professional direction and kind of course corrected me. But basically, I walked in and he was in his daycare center. He's saying, "It's the millennium, it's 1999." And I thought, I'm looking through speech pathology eyes at that point, and I thought, okay, this is a strange little kid. And he walked up and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Master." And when he made direct eye contact and called me master, I thought, my first thought was like, who's the master here? But I had this just rush of energy that went through my body. And I tried to shake it off. And then I took him to the back of the daycare center, and we went into a room. I shut the door, and I kind of slid my back down the door and just sat on the floor because he was brand new to me. He didn't want to be in there, typical kinds of experiences going on when you first meet an autistic child. But he was walking around, he was still saying, "It's the millennium, it's 1999. And then all of a sudden, I saw floating above his physical body, there was this body of light. And it was like here's his physical body, his light body's floating up above. And there was just this little tail that hung off the bottom of his foot, went right down in through the crown of his head and just touching into the heart space. And, I'm rubbing my eyes and thinking, I don't know what I'm seeing. And so I asked myself the question that anybody would ask themselves is like, what the heck is that? What am I seeing? And when I asked myself that question, I heard this little boy's voice inside my head, and it said, "That's my light body. You're here to put my light body back into my physical body." And I had no idea what he was talking about. I knew right in that moment that my life had changed forever. I don't know why I knew that, but he basically took me through a process that lasted a year where he would come to me telepathically, he would come to me in dreams, even a little bit of bilocation where I'm seeing his energy form standing in my room. And he would tell me what to do to help him integrate that light body back into his physical body. And at the time when I first met him, he was verbal, but only kind of rote verbal, like, "It's the millennium, it's 1999. If I had asked him a question, he wouldn't be able to respond to me. So he's functionally not verbal. And so he took me through this process that lasted a year. And at the end of that year, it just happened to be my birthday, and I decided to kind of culminate all our work together through an energy session. And I did this energy session with him, and I went to physically see him the next day. And when I went to see him, he was talking. He was just fully communicating, saying words, answering questions. I asked his mom what had happened. She said, I don't know what happened. It's just last night he just started talking. So once that happened, I had, not through advertising or anything, I just had all of these kids just start showing up that were on the spectrum, or that were energetically sensitive, or were having other kinds of experiences that were similar, having trouble being in their physical bodies. And I just started working with them. I used the same method of just listening to what the broader part of themselves was asking for. And when I followed those steps, they too did something. They too came in more fully to their bodies. And, over the years, this has been quite over 20 some odd years now, it's just gotten progressively more interesting and progressively more subtle as far as the information and the places we can go in order to support that integration. So it's been a ride for sure.
Could you talk more about that integration? Only because I don't know, other than maybe one other person, I've ever heard of anybody talk about that, where you're integrating the physical body and the light body. And I guess maybe because I would think that children maybe would already come in already integrated, but maybe not. And so this is new to me.
Yeah. So at least, again, I don't make any claims on any of this. I can just go by the experience that I've had to date. But what seemed to be the situation, let's say, especially for those diagnosed with autism, is that the frequency of their light body, or the frequency of their essence, was much higher than the frequency of the physical body that they were going to be having this human experience through. And so it's almost like they had to have the light body, or the information that's held in that higher frequency of them, separate from the physical part. And therefore, if you look at a child diagnosed with autism, they look like they're having challenges in the physical world. Their bodies aren't quite organized, and their minds tell their bodies what to do, and it just doesn't quite happen. Sometimes they would like to communicate, but they can't, because that's not all organized. And what I understood is, when the light body is fully organized, or fully entangled, integrated with the physical body, then some of those ways in which we regulate behavior, some of the ways in which we're able to communicate, regulate the body and the body's movements, they become more stabilized when the light and the body are together. So to me, I understand what you're saying, Tara, because it's like that, it's that part of, yes, they do come here at a higher frequency, let's say, or a different frequency band. I actually think they're kind of like the frequency band of the future. I think that they're a step in our, think they're a step in our evolution in many ways. But again, with any step in our evolution, there's that chaos between the information that they hold and the reality of living that in this world, right? And so to me, they're this transition population from what we have been, and a lower frequency, a lower kind of density, to a higher one. But we've got to create some balance between the two. So to me, integration is just that. How do we take the broader part of ourselves and literally interweave it with our human neurology, biology, psychology? Because when we do, then we can walk, no matter what our frequency is, then we can walk in the world as that, instead of having to keep one at bay and keep the body here. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, even because I'm, this is a question that's very personal for me, as in why I'm asking it is because I never thought of it that way. However, I'm looking back on our own history here and wondering in which ways I was doing that unknowingly,
Mm-hmm.
or in what ways my son was probably instructing me in how to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then how much things have gotten better. So just different ways in which, in the beginning, him always saying like, I cannot be in my body. I can't be here. I can't live in here. And then there was this, a period where he would always talk about his body as a completely separate
Yeah,
entity.
entity, yes.
Right. Like my body says no. My body
Yeah.
says it wants this.
Mm-hmm.
No, Dominic says that he wants this, but my body says that he wants that.
Right, right.
And then now as a mother, if you're paying attention enough, I saw
Mhm.
the change from when Dominic and the body became one, as in
Yes,
Dominic is one person now.
right. And I think also a lot of times we feel that, because we're so conditioned to think that we are the physical human body, that that's what we are, that we have a tendency to think that we have this big field of energy, or this big expanse of what we are, that's trying to cram into and fit into this little limited human form. And it's really not that way. It's that the human form is the focal point in this reality for the vastness of our being. It just so happens that, that's the Suzy focus, the Tara focus, the Dominic focus, right? That's that focus in this world. And so there's um, so the physical body is, I always see the physical body as like being in the center of the field of our totality, let's say.
Right.
And so it's not so much that we're trying to cram all that in. It's
Yeah.
that we're just trying to interface, like he was saying, so that the body and what's the bigger, the totality of us, that they're actually able to have a conversation. They're actually communicating with each other. It's not one or the other, it's both and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a question on that. I'm kind of like thinking out of it as in, if you think of the essence, just for ease of
Mm-hmm.
it, right? As like a giant ball, and there'd be a focus, right? Like a spot
Right.
on that ball, and that focus is the physical body of Earth, right?
Yeah.
Does that create other dimensions or stuff where other spots on that ball are other focus points?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a really good visual, because it's a visual I use a lot, actually. So I ask people very frequently to see themselves within a sphere, see themselves, and I call that the sphere of our totality, right? So on the one hand, you can say that that sphere represents all the different facets of all that we are, right? So
Yeah.
human being in this reality is one of those facets. And that's interfacing with all kinds of other facets.
Right.
Yeah. And um, so when we really begin to kind of pull those facets that we require to be fully present here, we pull those from the totality of that sphere, then we show up here as fully as possible. Yeah.
Right.
If a lot of the kids might be focused in some of those other points, and when they're focused on some of those other points, they look like they're not here. They look like they're paying attention to something that's not physically here. And they are. They have access to all kinds of different dimensions and realms and fields of information. So it's just which one are they more comfortable paying attention to? And the more they integrate, the more they become capable of bringing all those focal points into this reality.
Got it. This is so interesting to me. I've not had it in that example, and I love it because honestly, I was thinking about the whole body and like I'm trying to get my giant essence and soul into this one body.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
Or like, yeah, like, but have not even thought of it that way, and I will be adopting that. Okay, so I want to go back for a minute. Do you feel like then there is that correlation of the uptick in autism diagnoses at the time that it was, or do you feel like maybe it was just that the collective wasn't conscious of like a earlier collective, like the 1980s or the 1970s, did not have the ability to see autism? Or
Well, I think there are multiple facets that answer that question. First, I think it's important to understand that in the early 80s, well, maybe even in the late 70s, early 80s, we kind of, as a humanity, whether we were completely conscious of it or not, we were kind of looking at the world and kind of going, we need something else. I mean, we need a more intuitive perspective of reality. I mean, it was a very patriarchal world, in the 70s, 80s. It's I remember it. You were too young, but it's like I remember feeling that way, and so there's that much more patriarchal reality. So I think it was in 1986 or something, there was something called the Harmonic Convergence. And that was basically literally like an astrological setup. But that particular setup allowed a whole lot of souls that we were asking to come forth. It allowed them to start coming in. So in 1986, we start getting some kids starting trickling in that have a much higher frequency than we've been able to hold with a human body before. And so but it's still 1 in 10,000, right? But as that energy landed here, as we had a few, then we were able to have a few more, and then a few more, and what are we up to now? Like 1 in 54 or 1 in 48, whatever the statistic is now. But from a strictly spiritual perspective, energetic perspective, collective humanity called these kids in, and they started coming in mass, right? And so even by the mid 1990s, they were really starting to flood in. And so then there's this other segment where one of the first kids that I was working with, he said that in 1995, a lot of the kids started getting stuck. So I was like, what does that mean? What does it mean to get stuck? So again, they're coming into human form. They're integrating light and form to be a human being, to come through their parents and come into this reality. And one of the things that happened in 1995 is that the American Medical Association put out a letter that basically validated their decision, in their own minds anyway, to take us from 12 vaccines between birth and school age to 36. And so this little boy that I met in 99, through telepathy, he told me, go look at this and you'll see why we got stuck. And I was like, so in 1999, people are still listening to their doctors. People are still, so what's going on here? We have all these souls that are starting to come in at a much higher frequency. A lot of these kids coming in are boys. So we have a male body that would have typically gone down a patriarchal kind of reality, but they have a much higher frequency. They have a more intuitive capacity. So we have that neutralizing, right? And then all of a sudden we have all of this vaccine stuff kind of come out of thin air, or what appeared to me to be out of thin air. But it wasn't out of thin air. It was, I think looking back now, there was kind of this very calculated way of slowing down this evolutionary consciousness, right? And so those who had because I used to always ask myself, it's like, well, why do some kids get vaccinated and don't show up as autistic later? Why do some show up that way? Why do some not get vaccinated and show up that way anyway? What is this that's going on? And what I noticed is that the kids coming in at a much higher frequency were much more prone to being thrown off by something that was very dense.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, also too, don't you think, I mean, I can't really, if it was, they were coming in anyway, is the lack of help in general is just rare, to help with something like incorporation with like light and dark, or light body and
Well,
physical body, but also to the heavy medication popularity at that time as well.
Well, I think
Or,
it's a combination of a few things. So again, from the soul perspective, or from the essence perspective, let's say, you've got a humanity that's calling for something new, and you've got the essence of all of these individuals going, pick me, I'll do that, I can do that, let's go. And a lot of them, they're choosing to embody for the first time ever.
oh yeah.
They're going, pick me. Yes, it's like that frequency is very high, it's very developed. And so they're saying, let me go, I'll go. Of course, making that choice from that vantage point and actually being in a physical body with that higher frequency, that's a whole different ballgame. We all know that. We all have lives where we kind of go, what did I choose again? It's like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
So now you have this mass population that's choosing this. And so I can tell you that in 1999, there was very little conversation
Yeah.
about the consciousness, the information, the frequency that these children held, right? So there was really, just like anything that's new within collective human consciousness, we're pretty slow on the uptake.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been so conditioned to see difference as disorder that we don't typically like difference all that well. And so we create this energy that's called disorder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think there wasn't any information. There really wasn't any interest at that time.
Yeah.
People were scared. Parents were overwhelmed. This was something new. And as you have more and more of the kids come in, of course, you have more and more interest in who they are and what their difference is. But I know in 99, when I was saying this is a new population, this is almost like a new species coming in that hold information and capacities that we're all going to try to grow into, as we evolve. I mean, people thought I had 3 heads, at that point. And now there's all kinds of conversations about, the gifts of autism, awesomism versus autism. There's a lot of information now, and we're still just brushing the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is your feeling on, I feel like the spiritual community, I mean, it could be much bigger than that. However, the big talk around, the wave of children coming in, what's your feeling on that? Or what have you heard?
Well, I can just tell you what my experience has been. It seemed especially, and still to some degree now, but earlier on, it was like people were in one of two camps. It's like, to me, two parents could come to me. The child has the same symptoms, same behavioral characteristics, same lack of communication or whatever. One was called an indigo child or a whatever the latest was at the time. And another ended up with a diagnosis of autism or ADD, ADHD. But they were the exact same characteristics. It was just two different perceptual realities that the parents were looking through, right? And so what you also end up having is those parents or those professionals that were only seeing the physical, and so we're completely negating the spiritual part of these children, and that wasn't great. But it was also equally not that great when you had somebody who was just interested in the spiritual part but disconnected from the physical. And so I think that I think there was a real disservice done to some of these kiddos that were coming through, because again, it's not about this or that. It's not about the above or the below. It's about the integration of both. It's a both and. And so we can't negate the body when we're looking into the spirit of us, and we can't negate the spirit when we are engaged in the body. And so even that over the years has been, I think that's been an educational process, both for myself and for those people that I work with. And I know now pretty quick when it's all about energy, it's all about the metaphysical world. It doesn't really work that way. It's both and. So
Thank you for saying that. That makes me I try to get that across with parents that I speak to, and because it is easy to get caught in that trap of believing that it's one or the other, right? Like it's the physical or the spiritual. And I hate to say it, but there is quite I worry for the fad that just looking at the spiritual will
totally.
consume her.
Yeah.
Because that is not we're not going to thrive in that space, and it is a balance that needs to occur.
Right. And to me, it's like, if you're again, that I think that either or also comes out of this place of separation. And if I'm honest, I think part of the reason why, on another level of these kids, why we have a population that has separation, has this, they're somewhere else. I don't think we realize as a humanity how separate we are from ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just now getting to see in the world at large some of the things that have been hidden from us. Well, it's not just hidden out in the world, it's been hidden within us.
Yeah.
So to me, the outer world can't show up like that, until we can start to see that part within ourselves. And so, I think we just have to acknowledge that we've all been conditioned into some sense of separation from ourselves. And so wouldn't these kids come and reflect that back to us, so that we could also integrate back into ourselves, integrate those aspects of ourselves back into our own totality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to do the ultimate Oprah circle back. where going back to your, so this happens for you in 1999, and then how does it kind of play out into your life? I know you have 4 girls and you're married, and then how does that play out? Because knowing full force that once something like that occurs, it just, it can affect so many things. I mean, it affects everything in your personal life. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it did. And, I mean, I mean, there's no other way to say it other than it was extremely challenging. So within that first year, I not only had Riley, this little boy, coming to me and other kids starting to come to me, but it was almost like he had put the key in the lock and opened it. And I mean, I was seeing things and hearing different dimensions of myself and learning skill sets that were dormant within me that I didn't even know existed. And so there was a lot going on in that first year. And of course, my nice IBM husband at the time, what the heck's going on with you? Why are you talking about these things? And just go back to the way you were. And even like something like the vaccine issue, like once you're a parent and you learn through any means that something might be off with that. I mean, I had 4 daughters, like you say. So my youngest was 2 at the time. And I had to stop vaccinating. I had to make choices in my physical world that were important based on what I was learning through the broader part of me. So, that causes conflict and that causes all kinds of stuff going on. But I think the biggest thing that was a real challenge is once, maybe like a year into it, and I had kind of, okay, this is what I am now. I know that this is the direction I'm going. One day I just literally said, okay, I want my physical, mental, and emotional body to be in alignment with what I now know myself to be spiritually. So again, it was my own integration, physical, mental, and emotional. I want that to be aligned with the spiritual part of me, or the vibrational part of me. And within a week, my whole nervous system collapsed. So, and what I know about that now is that that's the rebuilding. That's the rebuilding of the physical, mental, and emotional body into a higher frequency. Yeah. So I knew that at the time, even to some degree, but try telling that to somebody who's watching you go from 120 pounds to 80 pounds because your whole body's collapsing and it's trying to rebuild. So yes, divorce and kids going one direction and other directions, and big challenge, big time, and as that started to all get reset, as the embodiment started to take on a different experience, then I could start pulling some of those pieces of the puzzle back together. So, moved closer to where some of my kids were. 3 went one direction, 1 went with me. So you've got this energy where you're watching it all fall apart, and then you're watching it rebuild into what it's designed to be now. And so that in and of itself was like a life experience in integration. Yeah. So, and it's great. I mean, now I have I really have a lovely relationship with all my kids. And it's a different relationship than I think is typical of mother-daughter dynamics, and even a really good relationship with my ex-husband at this point too. So so it all builds itself back, but yeah, not easy by any stretch.
No. And we had talked about this a little bit before we started this episode, and I had talked about it in my Awakening Diaries portion of the podcast, about this exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my husband had decided that how we were going to change things.
Mm-hmm.
And him being on board and whatnot. But then I suffered this mass exhaustion that next day, and to the point of like not being able to get off the couch,
Mhm.
having zero thought process. Like it just was blank
Yeah.
for I mean, it took months.
Yes.
That's why I'm moving slow over here. And it was so hard for him to watch because
Mhm.
um it kind of looked counterproductive. Like, look at us. We're gonna do something complete. We're going to relook at our life, and we're both on board and we're in line. And then
Yeah.
you, like, I thought you would get like a big burst of energy from that.
Yeah.
Um, and so, right, like the nervous system's breaking down, and then your own integration. Because mentally, in my mind, I had already integrated.
Yes. Yes. Me too. And I think that's, somebody explained that to me later. It's like, it's almost like you have to have the shift in your mental perspective first. It's almost like if Riley hadn't come in and shook me up, I wouldn't be able to allow more of myself in.
Yeah.
He he was kind of like the catalyst, right? And I think that we all have these catalysts in our lives to lesser or greater degrees to just shift us into a new structure. But we have to be on board with it mentally, emotionally, right?
Yeah.
Before we can literally start that rebuild. Because if we don't, we have no framework for
Yeah.
it. And we may not always know what the heck's going on, why we're tired or why our nervous system, but it's almost like we have to have that shift in reality. It's like, oh, okay, I notice, okay, my kids are different or my life experience is different. I'm opening to something more. And then the body goes, okay, you got that. You know what's going on here. Now let's reset. Let's restart. So, yeah.
That's
I still go through waves of exhaustion, especially right now when there's so much shifting again, so much more trying to be anchored, you know. And I think a lot of people, don't you, are experiencing that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, the running joke about, 2020 is how tired everybody was, right?
Yeah.
And but it makes me like think back, how many times did that nervous system like conk out, even though this one felt like the biggest. But like when I had a baby,
Yes.
when I decided that we were going to look at things, step out of the rat race and look at things differently for Dominic.
Yeah.
And all these bottom outs, when I already thought I was like then I already like thought I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we don't take into account either, because I've talked to thousands of parents now of kids who have all kinds of unique capacities, unique skill sets. And if you take them all back to their pregnancy, again, that growing human in your body is holding a different frequency.
Yeah.
It's holding a higher frequency. So your body is already trying to adjust to what's coming in through you. And so all of those places where there's been resistance or there's been, maybe we were conditioned to think we were small or less than or not enough, all that energy is trying to burn up. Well, it's not just trying to burn up, it is being burnt up in the frequency of that child that you're holding in your womb space.
Yeah.
So this mass exhaustion, I hear a lot of parents say, I had just this huge awakening when I was pregnant. Or, I used to see the world in this way, and all of a sudden I'm just pregnant. And now I have a completely different perception of life. Or I couldn't get out of bed, or my body was going through all these changes that weren't just a woman being pregnant. So I've heard fathers say similar things. It's like, wow, it's like, she got pregnant and my whole world started to shift or change. So that's the frequency of that baby coming in.
That's so, I love that. I'm just like, I'm stealing that and I'm stealing this and I'm stealing this.
Good.
And I even know what is interesting when you're pregnant in that way is I looked at Dominic because he was my first one. And I mean, I've looked at with Eve also, but how much of his, let's say, idiosyncrasies that he came in with, how much of that was embodied in pregnancy?
Yes.
Um, so nausea or clothing being tight or the headaches or and we could say it was pregnancy, but um, the intuition and how it comes through him in that scenario was coming through me.
Yes. So again, it's like I just had this aha probably just like within the last 48 hours. I don't know why it just showed up now, but you know, when you're thinking about uh, a, a different, I hate using higher and lower because it's not quite, let's say a more subtle energy field or a more expansive, let's say, energy field has access to more information, okay? So let's say that that's the essence of your child coming in. And in the past, most children or that part of them kind of fell asleep as the body starts to, you know, form in utero. But what happens if that doesn't happen? What happens as the essence is there, all that information is there, they're pulling in information from everywhere. And whereas in the past, that would have shut off, you know, as the body formed, it doesn't shut off anymore. The body forms, and all of that information is still available. So you're right. So they come into this world, and it's like, you know, mom was nauseous, you know, and the kid has projectile vomiting, or the child gags all the time, or mom didn't like tight clothes or felt uncomfortable or whatever. That energy is part of the energetic makeup of that child. And therefore, that's the go to that gets expressed when they feel uncomfortable. Yep, but there's some mechanism that used to shut down. It's like um, we used to fall asleep in that process of incarnating into a body. I don't think these kids do that. I don't
Yeah.
think they fall asleep, and therefore all the information is built into the body. Yep. It's not like
Yeah.
it's a here or a there, it's a oneness, it's a togetherness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'll circle back again. Um, so how do you proceed now, like when you know you've gone through your divorce and maybe like with your business, I hate using the word business, but like your, let's get rid of business, your work, how does that develop and how does things change or anything?
How did things change? You mean as
Yeah.
you know, it was so organic. Thank God, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I still don't know what the heck I'm doing as far as the business part of thing. I'm not a, I mean, I was a speech pathologist and I had that kind of set up, but I didn't really know what to do with all of this. So I actually, after I got divorced, I went back to being a speech pathologist for a while. I needed the money, obviously, and you know those kinds of things. But in 2008, I wrote Awesomism, and basically, I just needed to share my experience with the world. And I think enough time had passed that I felt like I just needed to say it for my own sanity. I just needed to get it out. And so I put the book out there. And what was so interesting is people contacted me from everywhere. I was shocked. People going, oh my gosh, I've had similar kinds of experiences. I know my child's telepathic. I know whatever. It's like, uh, there were so many people calling from so many different places. And then all of a sudden, so I wrote this book, and I'm out in the world, talking about it, promoting it. And in the process of that, I forgot to renew my speech pathology license. And I was just out and about doing other things, and the, bigger powers that be thought, okay, we'll take this as an opportunity to kick her out of speech pathology once and for all. So, so I figured out that I could not just reinstate my license. I was literally one day over, so I was going to have to go through the whole process all over again. I had 40 clients a week on that day, and I had to go in and tell them all that I couldn't work with them anymore. And I decided I was going to take a week, and I was just going to figure out what the heck was next. And immediately the kids came to me and they said, we want you to start the new Human Experience Project. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And they said, there are people already who are tapped into the information that we're trying to bring. Call them, get them to come, and let's start talking about that. I was like, I have no idea how to get those people here, but put up a website. I just wrote down what I was told to write down. And we had about 60 people like that. I mean, that became the next thing. And then wrote the book in 2008. Then that happened. Had all these people that were calling from all kinds of different places. The New Human Experience Project was a place to start them. And then naturally and organically, people just saying, they understood that they were having those experiences, but they didn't have a language for it yet. They didn't know how to make that purposeful, either, and they were doctors and therapists and teachers and, parents, all kinds of, professionals. And so we started the Autism practitioner process. And I think we took about 350 or so people through that process, and was really wonderful. And things just kind of just flowed from there. It's, it was just kind of one thing after another. One thing led to another. And so most recently, I was doing a course called The Journey Back to Love, because there was so much of what the kids were talking about and our own capacity to love ourselves that were really helping to make deeper connections between ourselves and the kids. So that became available. And something called Avatar Energetics, which is really about supporting the integration of the broader frequencies or the broader awareness of ourselves into our daily lives. And then there's the Autism Integration Series, where we're taking people through a 12-week process where they really begin to understand this from a much broader perspective, So it's just been, I remember somebody saying to me, it was a businessman actually saying to me, wow, who do you have helping you? Because, you really have a nice business model, or at least at that point I did. And I said, honestly, I have no idea. I said, it's just, the kids just were telling me what to do, and I was listening, and it just seemed to work its way through. So, yeah, I don't know what kind of business model that is. So.
I'm with you on this business model.
Yeah.
Because we have about 10 minutes, how would you feel that parents should start with to help their own children? I guess in this integration scenario.
Yeah. Well, I can default to what the kids have told me over and over again, when private clients ask that same question. It seems so simple, but the very first thing that they talked about is we need to learn to feel our way through life instead of think our way through life. So again, as we just start at a very basic level of getting in touch with how we feel. And then take that a step further and actually speak out loud how you feel, not how you think you should feel. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
had so many kids, especially nonverbal kids, say, well, the energy of I'm happy, is that's the word. I'm happy, I'm feeling great, I'm doing good. But underneath that is, I'm scared, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know. So you've got this feeling in the body and these words coming out of the body, and the two don't go together.
Yeah.
The kids are more tuned into how you actually feel. They're more tuned into that part of you for a very good reason. They're trying to make you more aware of that. But when we start putting those two together, they feel much more comfortable trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's I'm feeling this, but it's saying, this is what's being said. I must not, in their minds, especially as little people, young people, they're like, I must not have it right yet. So I'm not gonna say anything because this
Yeah.
feels like this and that feels like that.
And that confuses them later. Like
Totally.
that
Yeah.
actually creates a massive problem later.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that so much with Dominic as it is with Eve, but where I would say I feel fine, and he would just be like, "No, that is a lie. No, like that is a lie." And or we'd go to a party, and somebody would say to him, "Oh, I'm so interested in this thing that you're showing me," and he'd be like, "You are lying."
Yes.
Or the one, "I love my wife so much." That is a lie. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, "I'm sorry, we must leave. He just
Yeah.
needs a cupcake. We gotta go."
Yes. Yeah.
But um, and then also too, if you sat there and tried to convince him differently,
It
how
gets louder.
yeah,
Yeah.
he would get more upset.
Yeah.
But I think that is actually less dangerous than the other, with the child that is, oh, okay, when they say that they're happy and they actually are feeling disdain, resentment,
Right.
and but I just won't say anything.
Right.
Is yeah, there's a lack of trust in themselves.
It's yes, and again, if we're going to going to reintegrate, or if we're going to integrate into our own authenticity, then we need the Dominics of the world who are going to call us out on where we have been taught to fabricate. It's like that level of transparency um, is really amazing, because what it's doing is it's really getting us connected to the essence of us instead of what's been conditioned on top of us.
Yeah.
We're conditioned, as good speech language pathologists, as good IBM wives, as good whatever. We're conditioned to put on a particular facade. Except, how can the essence of us really come through unless we start breaking that down?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, I know it probably was very challenging on so many levels for Dominic to be like that, and at the same time, his ability to actually articulate that and say that. A lot of the kids who are nonverbal, they're trying to say the same thing, but because they can't verbally say it, they're saying it with their behaviors.
Yeah.
They're throwing a complete meltdown, in that same scenario where we're, just doing in many ways what we've all been taught to do to just survive.
Yeah.
And yet we're beginning to find, especially as we're all evolving together now, we're beginning to learn that survival really depends on our capacity to be authentic. Our survival depends on our capacity to be real and to be present with what's going on for ourselves at any given moment. So it's a great first step.
Have you watched the show Atypical?
I haven't.
Oh, it's so good. Um, so it's a show about a boy who's like, he's graduating from high school, going to college, and he's autistic.
Mhm.
And sure, we could talk about autism in that case, but it's more than that, as in like, and all the life scenarios that he's going through. But it's more than that because he's literally verbalizing just the truth. No,
Yeah.
your peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are terrible because X, Y, and Z. But I love the way you smell, and whatever. And what is interesting is that the family and the people around him just accept it as is and don't take offense to it, and they move on to the next thing. Or you'll see these circles of children with autism speaking very frankly, and they aren't offended, and they keep moving on, and you sit there and you go, the flow
Yeah.
that occurs when you are not offended.
Yes. Yes.
It is something it's something to be so amazed, and
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
I think this is exactly when we take the opportunity that these kids bring, they have this capacity to just look right within us. They know where those trigger points are. All children, quite frankly, know
Yeah.
where those trigger points are. It's just that those that are more energetically sensitive seem to be able to kind of go in a little bit deeper. They know exactly where we have covered up our authenticity. And so when we really begin to use that reflection from that perspective, man, talk about flow. It's like, we don't have to be offended by it. Like you say, we can simply go, oh, I see that that's been part of my makeup. I see that I've done that. And that revolves into something else. And you just start moving at quite a clip
Yeah.
into your own authentic self. And I've often said that I've never seen a population of parents who have been so interested in fast tracking themselves in their own evolution and their own development as parents like yourself who have kids who are highly energetically aware, informationally sensitive, right? It's
Yeah.
like, because when you've got that child, I mean, it's like it's 24/7. And on the one hand, it can be so challenging and so painful because it's constant. And on the other hand, there's this relationship that is constantly inviting you to love parts of yourself that you've never been able to love before.
Yeah.
So,
I was working with a parent last week, and I was thinking the same thing, is all of a sudden I'm seeing these parents that are just like, no more. I see the trauma and the writhing that is
yeah,
occurring with my child.
yeah,
And I don't want to do this anymore because I can see that I has to fix here inside.
yes,
And you're right. I've not seen that. I mean, we've how many? I've been able to see three other generations: my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents.
yeah,
But this generation of parents coming through, it gives me hope I because I can tell they want to do the work.
yeah,
They
yeah,
do. I mean, I do.
yeah. Yeah, and when we really start to see a correlation between our own capacity for self-love, the broader part of ourselves, and the relationship that kids play in all of that, then we're synced up. Then, that's what really gives me great hope for humanity too. And I honestly think that a lot of what's breaking up out in the world right now is for this very reason.
Yeah.
It's breaking up because, one, we're more ready than ever to feel things that we haven't felt before and to be present to parts of ourselves we've never been present to before. The kids are definitely helping to bring a whole new frequency that uproots all of that anyway. And I'm really excited about what's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, from that perspective.
I hate even to end this. I will say I'm enjoying wholeheartedly. You have these bi-monthly energetic meeting
Mm-hmm.
meetings, but I've been getting into your What's Up for Our Children. Is that the
Yeah,
correct title? And I highly recommend people look into that because it's so interesting because you're going with different questions, and it's not just like a topic. And for us people who love to bop around and feel like
yeah,
it's really hitting, I
yeah.
love it. I love it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank
But
you.
where do people find you in your work?
Yeah, SuzyMiller.com is the easiest way, and I'm Suzy with a Z, SUZY. And yeah, the What's Up for Your Children, What's Up for You. We've got a monthly energy session that is really wonderful. And so yeah, there's quite a bit of information there to check out. So
You've created a ton of resources.
thank
Become,
you.
for me, who's like a resource junkie, give me the
Yeah.
resources. And the podcast episode you did with Lee Harris was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So I highly recommend that also. So
Yeah,
thank
he's
you
a
so
great
much.
guy.
He is a great guy.
Yes, yeah.
Energy. I love his energy updates.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But
Thank you.
thank you for doing this with me. And I
Much appreciated. Anytime.
oh good,
Yes.
because I'm going to call you back.
Sounds great. I'll be ready and waiting. That'll be awesome. So.